Hi guys, here I am in beautiful Zone 7A, Western North Carolina. Going to be doing my first full garden tour of the season. It's June the 2nd, 2019, so let's get started. We will just start with the closest ones here. This is pineapple sage, and actually the plant over there that has kind of a different form, but it is the same plant. It's also pineapple sage. The plant in the middle here is it's a dwarf red buckeye, Aesculus parva, something like that. I'll put the exact names on the screen here because I know I'll butcher them all to death. All right, this pineapple sage, I keep hoping that the hummingbirds are going to discover it and really just go nuts over it, because they're supposed to. But as I've said, may not have said according to how I edit this video, the hummingbirds have been few and far between. This plant was kind of stressed out earlier on in the year, maybe why it bloomed a little ahead of the other plant. See, the other plant is much nicer, and it's just starting to bloom here. And let me show this first plant here because it has better bloom examples. You see, this is just exactly the type of deep-throated bloom that the hummingbirds do like. But later on in the year, the various other pollinators do get on those blooms. It seems like the pollinator situation here is not good until about mid-July. This here is the dwarf red buckeye. Is supposed to be a hummingbird plant, early season hummingbird plant. This tree or bush, whatever you want to call it, will lose its leaves early in the year. It loses its leaves in really lots of times mid-August. But it's not. This one's not bloomed yet. It's in its third season and its second or third location, but I think it's happy here, and that's why it's kind of so small right at the moment. It's kind of had a rough life so far, but hopefully getting better. Right over here we've got a black night butterfly bush. It's really growing very, very nice. These blade looking plants here are Crocosmia lucifer, which as you all know, or probably do know, is very good hummingbird plants, and the hummingbirds do go to these plants. They did bloom very nicely last year. Right here is it's not much of a good example, but this is Salvia darcii, which also has some red. It has very similar blooms to the pineapple sage, really, except a little bit larger. I think I've got one bloom on a different plant I'll show you later on. Right here is a Daphne. This is Eternal Fragrance Daphne. This one here is about 1 foot tall. Very, very odoriferous. It's a great smelling plant, but it's a little small, but it will get much bigger. These little old plants here, you will see them dotted throughout the garden. And let me pull up a what looks like a morning glory. Can't have that growing here. These here are cypress plants, not cypress vines. I'll put the technical name, but they're cypress plants. They're a biennial. They form this rosette. They form this rosette the first season, and then send up a pretty long stalk the second season, with, again, to attract the hummingbirds. I try my best to attract hummingbirds, and they just let me down. I always have them, but not as many as I want, or as frequently as I want. This is the Bolero hummingbird mint. Had a moderate success with it so far as how good the plant has looked. This is some type of perennial Gaillardia, also a perennial Gaillardia here. This here, whenever it blooms, well, even before it blooms, will be a Helenium, Mardi Gras Helenium. Really a strikingly beautiful plant when it's in its peak. Here we have a nano purple butterfly bush. Kind of hard to get everything in here. Right here is a Luna, a hardy hibiscus called a Luna. Last year, even though you see a few things have been eaten on it, it was the only one of my hardy hibiscus that just didn't get eaten alive last year. Of course, all of them came back here this year. We have a different, this is a Miss Molly or something like that, butterfly bush back here. It's a dwarf, semi-dwarf butterfly bush. And right here we have some Monarda fistulosa, and one of those looks like it's getting on up close to 5 foot tall there. These have just the pale purple blossoms on them. I did buy late last season 3 Jacob Klein Monardas, and hopefully they will show up in here amongst all the pale purple, and I'm hoping that they, you know, kind of dominate, grow to dominate the other ones. I'll, you know, pull out some of the other ones and give the Jacob Klein a little bit of preferential treatment, and we'll see what happens. I have 3 Hypericum higcoat bushes right in here. They actually are doing a pretty good job of keeping the Monarda at bay. The Monarda, of course, is a notorious spreader, but the Hyperium higcoat is holding its own, but as it's turned out, has been just 0 on the pollination scale. Absolute 0. Before I planted this, I saw a video on YouTube with a bee, just more than one bee, just 2 or 3 bees in the middle of one of these blossoms, just swimming in pollen. And my blossoms, even though this is the same plant and it looks exactly the same, the blooms and the foliage structure looks exactly the same as the one on YouTube, these, from what I can detect, have no pollen in them. I know the straight species of this, see, this is a cultivar, Hypericum higcoat. There are numerous cultivars of St. John's wort, is what this is more commonly known as. And the straight species, whenever you crush one of these blooms, like so, you know, people use them medicinally. When you crush one of them blooms, your fingers will turn purple. And that is the medicinal aspect of it, the purpleness. And if it don't turn purple, it doesn't have this. So these here, if a person wanted to grow one, you know, to use medicinally, you could not do it, not with these particular Hypericum higcoats, but because it does not have whatever the properties are that make that turn purple. Right here we have some Verbena bonariensis. I'll show another bed later on where there's 16 of these plants, much better examples than this. But I didn't plant, I planted these last year, and I really never expected them to winter over. These are not reseeded plants even. They just wintered over. The zone 7A, I did not expect them to winter over, but they did. Okay, continuing on. Right in here I have, this is a sugar buzz series of Monarda. It's low growing, the grape sugar buzz or something like that. It's really not, you know, it looks pretty good, but pollinator wise, 0. And the Monarda fistulosa, of course, in there has done pretty good pollinator wise, not as good as I had hoped. Here is a rosemary arp. The thing is about 18 inches tall, maybe 20 inches tall. It's just had some minimal blossoms on it since I've planted it, and nothing as far as pollination wise. This is probably in its last year. I will probably yank this out next season. Right here is a bloomerang lilac. beautiful plant when I planted it. Always been healthy, still a beautiful plant. It has kind of minimal type of blooms in the spring. I mean, it's supposed to bloom and bloom again, have big old blooms and then bloom again sporadically through the summer. Mine has not done that yet. This is his this is probably its third full season here. And I've threatened to pull this thing out because it's not done so well, but it's, I don't know, I paid quite a bit for it, and it is a beautiful plant, and it does have one pretty flush of blooms, so I'll probably leave it. Here is my Joe Pye weed. Here's my Joe Pye weed. It's a dwarf form of Joe Pye weed. And even the dwarf forms of Joe Pye weed still get 5 foot tall or so instead of the normal forms, which can get around 8 foot tall or so. Here's a dwarf magnolia called a Betty magnolia, and this thing has taken quite a while. It's taken about 3 years to get to this size, which is pushing 3 feet, probably a little less than 3 feet at the moment. I have a few Augustache here. I forget the exact name, right? A blue boa Augustache. If it was later in the year, this would be covered with pollinators, but I don't know. Like I say, my pollinators don't really get cranked up until mid-July here. The only exceptions are if you have a mass planting of something that the honeybees like. I reckon the word spreads in the honeybee community, and they'll flock in on that. But otherwise, I just do not do that well on pollinators. Right here is some liatris. Most of this is a variety called the meadow. It's a Liatris linguastylis is what it is. All of it is Liatris linguastylis, except for right here is the more common Liatris spicata, otherwise known as gay feathers. And the gay feathers, spicata liatris, has been so far proven to be a much more robust grower around here than the Liatris linguastylis, but I'm ever hopeful on it. Here is a small example. I won't spend much time on this plant because it's a small example of a Shoal Creek vitex, which in this area has a winter dieback. According to the size of the plant, anywhere, see this one here would go almost all the way back to the ground dieback if it got down to 0. Otherwise, like at 10, it would have just some brown, some tip dieback on it. Just depends on how cold it gets. And here's the back side of my Monarda, just the back side of everything here. Here's some what you call stock plant, and it's proven to be just pretty much a nothing plant. Right here is a Penstemon murrianus, and I'm thinking the hummingbirds should like it, although I've not seen them on it, but I'm sure they probably have been on it because just from what I read, they like it a lot. I'm hoping that in years to come it will spread out much thicker than this, but we'll see. Here, both of these are a type of cardinal flower, a cultivar. This one is called Black Truffles. Not really grown that much this year, and I'll have to consult my notes and tell you what this one right here is. Okay, moving on. There's I forget the name of this, maybe a Prince Charming butterfly bush, I'm not too certain. Right here is a purple giant hyssop. Growed it from seed this year. It's about 6 inches tall. Looking pretty good. I think that it's going to wind up doing good. I probably have 20 of these plants dotted around through my gardens. And right here of course is a foxglove that it's already bloomed, so it's a biennial It blooms the second year and then it's gone. All right, that's pretty much it for the big dig. We're gonna move right over here to my north side garden. All right, this plant here is really 4 plants. It is basil. In the very center is African blue basil, flanked on 3 sides by wild magic basil. And it's attracted a few pollinators, bees, bumblebees, a few generalist bees. In the middle of the year, I mean later on, middle of July, like I say, nothing cranks up good here pollination-wise till the middle of July. But in the middle of July, this thing will be absolutely covered up with bumblebees. I mean, bumblebees and carpenter bees, probably more carpenter bees. I have more of them than anything when things really get to cranking pollinator wise. But I had this was flopping on me. I had to put this little post in the center, and I took some string and tied the plant up to that. But this I'm well pleased with how it's looked. If that will hold its form between now and frost, that will go till frost. Forget that. There's a couple of candy corn plants. They're just now getting started. Here's a cigar plant. I actually, keep in mind this is zone 7A. This will not overwinter outside here, or at least it never has. But on the unheated back porch, where, like I say, the low temperature this year was 4 degrees, probably gonna guess the back porch probably got down into the probably down to about 12, 13, and it did overwinter there on the back porch. Of course, it also has a distinct advantage on the back porch of not having any frost on it. So it did overwinter, so that's a pretty large one. Mexican heather. Eventually it will be covered up with bees. Not now though. And here was another surprise from last year. This is more pineapple sage. I had 3 plants here. They got, see, last year was the first year I planted it. Probably got 6 foot tall and never bloomed until, oh goodness, it was September. It was the middle of September. It was kind of disappointing at how late it bloomed. That they drew in quite a bit of pollinators after it bloomed, but not so much the hummingbirds. But it overwintered right out here in zone 7, pineapple sage. It shocked me, but it did. Here is one of my better examples of the Shoal Creek Vitex. I'll show a close-up later on of my best one of these, so I won't waste time on that. Here is a very small example of a Miss Kim lilac, which is one of the smaller lilacs. I ordered this online, and later on, you know, I spent like 20 bucks on it probably. It was much smaller than this even. And later on I noticed Lowe's has them for the same price, and it's like 4 times larger than this, so I feel kind of bad about that. But eventually that will turn into a nice plant, I do believe. Okay, here we go. We have 2 bees fighting. What the heck? I don't know if you can see this. Wow. I'm just going to be quiet and show this. That's amazing. So the smaller bee there, okay, finally the larger bee, which is probably a carpenter bee, just gave up and took off, because the other bee just kept horning in on it there, just kept attacking it. And I'm not sure what kind of bees that smaller bee is, but right now there's 2 of them floating around. I'm going to try to get a close up here. Okay. Where are you? All right. This is very much a success story here. This is a Millennium Garlic. Maybe next year I'll finally decide to divide it or something, I don't know, but yeah, it's pretty much got this pot almost filled out. It's got just a little bit to go. And when you see all these rocks on the sides of my plant, that is more for squirrel protection than anything else. If I don't put rocks on the sides of stuff, the squirrels just go to town digging. They try to anyway. But as you can see, this Millennium Garlic, there's quite a few bloom shoots coming up. And this is a great plant. I mean, I'm not, to tell the truth, I'm not crazy about the smell, especially when it's in bloom. You'll notice a distinct garlic odor for sure if you crush any part of this plant. You will notice a garlic odor, and when it's in bloom, you don't have to crush it. You'll notice it anyway. But it is a great plant. Pollinator-wise, even bloom longevity. Each bloom lasts quite a while. And it does repeat blooms sporadically. After that big full first flush of blooms, it will send out a few more. Okay, we have, so can't recommend Millennium Garlic highly enough. More candy corn, and I had a couple of super large cleomes that came up last year, right here in this crack. And you can see what happened this year. There was probably, when they first came up, hundreds of them in there. I'm sure they're probably self-thinning out, where there's, instead of hundreds, maybe a couple dozen or something. But I have not, and am not going to thin these out manually. I'm just going to let them do what they're going to do. We'll see. I think that them being all crowded together is going to keep them short, because here's evidence of it. This one here is only about a foot tall, and it's already starting to bloom here. So I don't know how good looking they'll be crowded together like this, but we'll see. All right. I do have a honeysuckle growing up this post here, and one other post on the front. Let me show the other one because it's a better example. This is a gold flame honeysuckle, and it has bloomed already and continues to sporadically bloom. So it's a really great looking blooms, really. And my hummingbirds do, whenever they deem to visit me once or twice a day, they never fail to check out the gold flame honeysuckle to see if anything's in bloom. And right here is some of the omnipresent autumn joy sedum that everybody has and loves. And flanking that is some type of speedwell, Veronica. I'll put the name of it across the bottom because I can't think of it right now. But I've got a year-old specimen of this. This was the first season here, and whatever kind this is, it maintains its foliage much better than your average speedwell whenever the blooms die off. So it's a very good-looking front border plant. Pollination-wise, zero. You would think Veronica speedwell. I have blue border speedwell, which gets a little bit raggy when it quits blooming, but does much better pollinator-wise. Right here is a red lantana, and that's all it says on it, is just red lantana species-wise. I keep trying the lantana, pollinator-wise, butterfly-wise, because purported to be so good. I mean, just time and time again you'll see videos where people talk about how good they are, but it hasn't proven the case here. But I'm going to keep trying. Okay, here we've got some asters. This is Woods Blue aster, which I think that the rabbits have kind of been keeping mowed down. They've been keeping this particular variety does not get very tall anyway, only about 6 inches. but I really think the rabbits have been keeping it mowed down to 3 inches, so I don't even know if it will bloom. But if it turns out to be a sacrificial plant and the rabbits just stay on it and not anything else, then it will have served at least a purpose, even if it does not bloom. Right here is some radon's favorite aster, and this is really gonna have just tons and tons of blooms on it. I'm really hopeful that this does as well as I'm thinking it's going to. Right here is a couple of cigar plants. They're pretty small at the moment. And these 3 pots up there is some fuchsia. I was thinking the hummingbirds would like it, but it's kind of hard to tell because the plants haven't really done that much, and I really don't have hardly any hummingbirds, so I don't know. It's fuchsia Sanahamph. It's a weird name of fuchsia, and the plants are healthy, but they're growing very slowly. Right here is some black and blue salvia that is only just now starting to come into bloom. The hummingbirds I'm sure will like that. I've not seen them on it because it's not really bloomed yet. That's some lemon mint. No, it's not lemon mint. You know, there is a difference. This is lemon balm. Totally different than lemon mint. Lemon mint is supposedly a great pollinator plant, which I've planted some from seed, but it's probably too late in the season for it to do much. But the lemon balm, I just don't know much about that. It probably won't do much from a pollinator perspective. Right here is a mandarin honeysuckle. Earlier in the year it had some gorgeous orange blooms on it. Turned out to be not much pollinator wise, but like I said, don't take that as a very good indication, because my pollinators don't show up till the middle of July. Say it with me again, middle of July. It's not don't make a drinking game out of it. Okay, here is a clethra. This is a ruby spice clethra. It's a pretty late bloomer by Mother Nature's design, and yeah, I love the smell of these things, and they draw pollinators. They just don't last long enough when they do come into bloom. I have 3 different kinds of clethra. I've got this here, the ruby spice, and right here is a 16 candles clethra. Right here is a vanilla spice clethra. I got a better example of it elsewhere. And here is a strange thing. I've shown this before last year. This is the 16 candles dwarf clethra, and okay, I've got 2 of them. There is a normal looking one right there, and right here it seems to have broken its hybridization somehow or another, but I don't know what they had it hybridized with. I'll have to look it up, because these leaves, you know, they're bound to be clethra leaves, I imagine, and then they're coming right out of the base of the plant there. So, but they're bigger than any clethra leaves that I do have. So we'll see how that goes. All right, here we have a Caryopteris. It's getting quite large, and we've got a status plant. I'm really hopeful that this will turn out to be something decent. This one here is sending up a stalk in the center. I think I saw another one somewhere that's starting to have some red show up in the blooms. Okay, moving on back. This is a wisteria that is just gotten out of control. It's just splattered out everywhere. Haven't really been impressed with this wisteria. It has bloomed some, but the blooms do not seem to attract pollinators, and I've had a hard time training it to grow on this on these posts here. I may have to put up additional posts and see what I can manage with this thing. I don't know. It's hard to bend the branches around without breaking them to get them to climb, and it would be climbing very nicely were it not for the squirrels, but every time I try to do anything with it, the squirrels just tear it right back down. So I've been thinking about replacing it with something else. I can't justify keeping this here pollination wise. The only advantage I see to this would be if I were to put up a couple of extra poles on that side and that side, and maybe in the ground on this side. I would have all kind of things to tack this plant up to. It would wind up being just a massive amount of vines growing up someday, and it is very nice for the birds to have something like that to perch on. So they would enjoy it. Pollinators might not enjoy it, but the birds would absolutely love to have a big bunch of sturdy vines there to come and perch on. So that would be a plus. Right here is another St. John's wort plant. I'll show my better example later on. This is a couple of butterfly bushes, the dwarf butterfly bushes. This is a cutting I took, and this is a cutting I took. Came from Walmart. I think this is called the Buzz series of butterfly bush. It's a dwarf. This here is it's one that's supposed to get huge, have huge panicles, called Grand Cascade butterfly bush. I see no grand panicles yet, but it's only in its second year. Right here is the sunny blue border speedwell. I've had this plant for several years, and it's always attracted a lot of pollinators. This is also a dwarf butterfly bush from the Buzz series. I happen to have my tag right here, and this will wind up being a magenta, Buzz Magenta Improved. And this is, apparently it is improved, this dwarf, but it's getting it's getting pretty big. I know later in the season all of them should be that big, but it's pretty early in the season for it to be that big, so that's pretty cool. Right here, last year I had a kind of a poorly constructed arbor here, and we had 16 inches of snow in December, and then the whole thing just collapsed. It had a huge Carolina jessamine group of vines all the way over the top of it with a lot of weight, caught all the snow and just come tumbling down. And I wasn't crazy about the Carolina jessamine. Foliage wise it was great, pollinator wise zero, because the blooms got frosted out. Every spring the blooms would get frosted out, so I never had much of any bloom, and what blooms were there never drew pollinators. So I took the opportunity to yank that out, as pretty as it was, from a foliage perspective, and I have put some sort of honeysuckle vines in here. And of course, every honeysuckle vine I plant is with the design of drawing hummingbirds. As hard as I try, I'm having a difficult time, but eventually I will get enough early blooming stuff that will attract them early in the season and keep them in here. This is one that's supposed to be pretty fragrant, which is kind of unusual for the American cultivars to be fragrant, but this one supposedly is. Right here is two smallish plants I planted called Bethany, and okay, don't panic, this is not Florida Bethany, this is Bethany officinalis, which is a totally different animal and does not run amok. And these two little plants certainly have not run amok. They've stayed pretty small this year. Now, right here is a Sonic Bloom Pink Weigelia. May not look like much right now, but like people say in all our videos, you should have saw it a month ago. Lots of times people say you should have saw it 2 days ago, but a month ago this was just covered with really nice pink blooms. And from a distance, really, you could not tell any difference between this and an azalea. I mean, the blooms just sit covered up. You can see this, the remnants of one bloom there. This is a reblooming shrub, and it does on occasion send out a bloom or two through the season. Alrighty, let's keep moving on. I want to, before my battery runs out here, I want to go. This is a not a Caryopteris. This is a uptick coreopsis. I don't know what the full name. It's maybe yellow and gold, but uptick is the main thing you need to know on this one, coreopsis. Right in here, I've got quite a few kind of scraggly looking Salvia darcii that I'm just nursing along. This is their first year. Hopefully they get good enough to last through the winter, and yeah, hopefully we'll be much better next season. Alrighty, Nanho purple butterfly bush, but here is my largest St. John's wort Hyperium higcote vine. Again, like I say, no pollinators. As pretty as it is, you know, I may leave this one since it looks so good, but I have 4 or 5, I have 7 other ones, and I cannot justify leaving 7 Hyperion higcote in my gardens when they're not drawing pollinators. There's just things that I would rather have, as pretty as it is. And here's my best example of a vanilla spice clethra. Beautiful blooms, fragrant, draws pollinators. The blooms just don't last as long as I would like, but otherwise a nice plant. All right, here is a purchase from this year called a Hard Rock Candy Penstemon. You know, some penstemons supposed to do pretty good pollinator wise. I haven't had a lot of luck with that, but I continue to try different varieties, hopefully to find the one that will. I guess I'll probably wind up planting a native. When in doubt, when you're having troubles like that, I guess don't plant a cultivar. Try to find the native species of whatever you're interested in and plant it, because you know, all the hybridization just sucks the life out of some of these plants from a pollinator perspective. Right here is a fuchsia Magella Inca, or whatever you want to call it. I'll put the name of it up on the screen. This is its first season. This is a plant that you're supposed to plant very deeply. And it came to me as a very small plant. Right now it's only about 7 inches tall, but it's got about that same amount underground. I repotted it 2 different times, and every time I repotted it, I put it deeper into the soil, and when I planted it here, I put it deeper into the soil, and that's supposed to really help it out. It's kind of like a tomato plant. You can actually replant this plant. Like right now, if I wanted to replant it somewhere else, like if I didn't want it here, I would plant it all the way to right there. I would just leave just the tips of the, like the top 3 to 4 inches above ground, and you don't even trim off the bottom. You just plant it. And that's supposed to help it survive the winters and give it a good root structure, just like a tomato plant would be. Here's a small patch of swamp milkweed, and even though I've only saw 1 monarch this year, it must have gotten pretty busy on my milkweed, because looky there. Yeah, that's a pretty, whoa, that's a pretty large one. Probably will be going in the chrysalis before too long. He might go through 1 more instar phase before he does. But on this swamp milkweed here, I've got 5 or 6 monarch caterpillars, and I've got a couple of other small patches of milkweed. I need to step up my game on the milkweed, but all of my milkweed small patches has a few monarch caterpillars. I did expand this, or trying to expand it just a little bit this year with some small type of plants here. Hopefully, I mean, I grew these from seed. what I need to do, I just need to take, like, for example, this bed here and just devote it entirely to milkweed. I think I'll do that, or try to do that next year. I've got, right now, there's some annuals in it, so it won't be any problem. I've got some of the basil, the African blue basil and the wild magic basil, and this is already gone past its flowering stage. This is Lacy Facilia. Had a few pollinators, and I think if I had a big stand of this Lacy's Facilia, see, it's got these fiddlehead type blooms. I mean, the blooms have already gone past, but if it was the middle of July and I had a large stand of it, I think I would be abuzz with pollinators on it, which is why in another part of the garden I do have some of this seeded, and we'll see how that does. Okay, continuing on around here, I've got a couple of new plants I grew from seed here. This is another speedwell, just blue shade speedwell. We'll see how that turns out. This is my best example, bloom-wise so far, of a status plant. You can see, I thought it had red blooms, but it's going to be purple blooms. Alrighty, moving on. There's my water dish for the birds, and they bathe in this thing and drink from it. I have to put fresh water in it every day, so they really enjoy that. And even though it's the 2nd of June, here is an azalea still in bloom. This particular azalea always blooms later than, like a month later than anything else, and stays low to the ground. I have never trimmed one bit of this azalea, and it's not really much more than a foot tall, maybe 14 inches, and it's probably 4 years old, never been trimmed. And I just love this thing because it's just such an oddball. And it seems that it's spread out quite a bit from left to right there from what it was a couple of seasons ago. I got it from Kmart before they completely shut down about 4 years ago here in town. And the tag on it said Enchanted Elegance Azalea. So I don't know if that's a common cultivar or what, but anyway, there you go. If you want a low-growing, low-spreading azalea, won't take over the creation, there you go. All right, let's move on here. I think I've pretty much got this bed covered. I do have some great looking hostas here. Not really a hosta person, but you know, there's a place for them. I've got two main brands in here. One of them is called First Frost. This is not I think this is one called June, and this one here is called First Frost. If that's wrong, I will tell you in the description. I could have it absolutely backwards, and if I do have it backwards, I probably won't be able to figure it out from any of my notes. Sorry about that. All right, so here we go. Let me come out to the front, and I'll just shoot an overview of how things look. One additional thing, I've really never had any luck. This is excuse me. This is red yucca. This sorry example of a plant here is red yucca, which I've experimented. This is like 4 years old, and I've experimented with it, trying to change the soil and the location and everything. I've got 3 of these in different locations, trying to get one to do something, trying to just jack it up somehow or another, and it just don't want to be jacked up. But anyway, this is a red yucca, and I'm going to keep on trying until I either kill it or get it to do something. My latest thing was I put a whole bunch of lime on this one. Didn't seem to hurt it any. Alright, let's just back up here. This is going to be part 1 of this video. My battery is so low, it's going to be a day or 2 before I film part 2. So that's pretty much it, everybody. So from Zone 7 North Carolina, I bid you farewell.